Mercer has just come out with the 2022 edition of the Mercer CFA Institute Global Pension Index Survey. India ranks 41 out of the 44 countries surveyed. Why does our country fare so poorly? In this survey that essentially evaluates retirement systems across the globe on parameters such as adequacy, sustainability, and integrity. What does this poor score mean for you and me? Are there steps that policymakers can take to boost our score in future surveys? And most importantly, what can we as individuals do to augment our financial security in old age? To get an answer to these questions and more, we spoke to Preeti Chandrashekhar, India business leader at Mercer. Do watch this interview to learn more about the rather serious business of planning for retirement. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to our show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here, Sanjay.
So most surveys on retirement seem to indicate that Indians are grossly underprepared for this event. Recently, there was this Max Life Kantar survey, which showed that most people regret not having started their retirement saving earlier. A lot of people said their savings would be exhausted within 10 years of retirement. And some even admitted to the fact that they did not know where to start. So against this kind of a background, give us a sense of the challenge that people are up against. Why is it so difficult to have an adequate corpus, and why should people take this business of saving for retirement much more seriously than they do today?
Sure, Sanjay. So I think you have about 2 to 3 questions embedded in a single question. So I'll take them one by one. The first one is underprepared for retirement. And I would just like to point out that this is not just a India-specific problem, but it's actually a global problem. And if you look at a lot of survey reports that are available from other countries, countries that already have a social security net also have many households feeling that they're sort of not prepared to retire. And even if they are to some extent, with the increased longevity, people are worried that they might outlive their retirement income. So obviously, India is no exception. But having said that, there are certain contextual things in India which I thought I should point out to you. The first one is the cultural and family setup. Hitherto, we would have parents expecting that the children would take care of them because they had taken care of their parents when they were working. So this is something fundamentally which is changing because we are seeing a lot of nuclear and smaller families. The second one is I would like to point out on the savings pattern. Okay, we've seen over the past several decades that the focus has largely been on real estate and gold. It used to be the favorites for us in India. And because of the fact that real estate and investment in equities looked very bullish, it actually helped people in sort of building a retirement corpus. And distribution has become less skewed, of course, in the recent times, and people have become more savvy as investors in the capital markets. But I think this is more in urban India. Because rural India, you still see a lot of uneven income pattern to be able to save in a more systematic manner. And the third challenge there is the consumption behavior. You have multiple forces literally eyeing the same pot for spending as well as saving. So that becomes very challenging for us to sort of balance. Is the situation grave? Yes, of course it is grave. Something really needs to be done about this because we have to remember things that we are all expected to live longer, but we are not sure whether we're going to be as healthy as we think we would be. And as longevity increases, healthcare expenses also mount. And if you step back and look at the workforce in the organized sector specifically, defined benefit plans, index-linked pensions, which some PSU banks used to have, which the government used to have, is a thing of the past. Yet we've seen that a large section of people feel that they will get provident fund and gratuity upon their retirement, and so that's for them. They think that is a substantial amount. They don't realize is that this provident fund and gratuity that they would get as lump sum on retirement would just about be able to take care of 30% of their post-retirement corpus needs. And if you add NPS at a certain point in time, then that would perhaps take care of another 10% or so. And this, mind you, if they have not moved jobs, because if they moved jobs, then it further erodes the lump sum that they would get, especially from gratuity. And markets go through roller coaster rides, so it gets more challenging for us to plan for retirement. Another challenge for planning for retirement is, how do you define retirement? You see, the older times you used to be having 58 or 60 as a retirement age. But now you're talking about 50 at retirement, 50 people want to retire at the age of 50. And everything has got very personalized, right from buying a phone to buying many other things. Everything gets personalized, and so people also want the choice of when to retire. And I think that is the biggest challenge for us to plan, because I don't even know what is the end date or the date of commencement of retirement that I'm talking about. So how do I plan for it? And then money is very important. It's complicated and can really be destructive. And when it comes to long-term planning, there are many unknowns that one needs to make assumptions on. Personal circumstances will change, external environment will change, and even tax rules will change, as we've seen in the recent past, right? And government regulations will obviously change, because nothing is will stay the same over a 30 to 40 years of employment. So, and investment returns. So there are a whole lot of things that one needs to take care of. And that in itself becomes very challenging when it comes to, how do I plan for retirement? So obviously this is a subject which needs more attention than people are giving it currently. And, very pertinent points that you raised. Over to you.
How much does one need to have? Give us a sense of the corpus that one needs to have at the time of retirement to consider oneself safe.
So if I look at my annual salary, okay, just a rule of thumb to just give us an idea on how much money I will need to be able to have a decent living post-retirement. Just imagine your retirement at a certain date in the future, and consider your annual salary is, let's say, X. You will need 25 times of your annual salary so that you're able to withdraw at the rate of 4% for the next 20 years. That's the first rule of thumb. The variations, of course, any rule of thumb will have variations, is how much would you want to withdraw from your corpus every year? 4% is a general minimum. You might need an 8% because of some kind of a holiday you have, or some kind of other needs that you sort of need more flexibility on. Beyond that, you will be able to consume your capital. So how do you look at it? Is best to see your current expenditure, assume a 7% inflation up to the period when you want to retire, and use that to calculate the present value. And then you sort of use people have Excel functions also, right, to be able to use a present value. And then you sort of then what is the kind of present value of the corpus that you want. But that's all. It's not just a one-time exercise. Monitoring it is also very important as you move along, because things change. As I said, talking about anywhere between 30 to 50 to maybe higher number of years in future. That's the horizon we are talking about. So obviously, you need to keep monitoring it on a regular basis.
Now, you have come out with the Mercer CFA Institute Global Pension Index. What are the key parameters on which this survey evaluates pension systems across the globe?
Thanks for the question, Sanjay. And this is an annual, report that we come up with. And Mercer is tied with the CFA Institute to come up with a global pension index ranking, which ranks essentially the efficacy of the pension systems in those countries which have participated, and looks at three key areas. And I will talk about it from an individual standpoint. As an individual, this entire report tells me how much will I get, as in the country. Let's say if you look at India, the kind of pension systems that we have, which include state pension, employer-sponsored pension, and employee-sponsored pension, what is the kind, what is it that I will get? So that measures the adequacy of the pension system. Next question is, how long will I get it? Which talks about sustainability of the pension system. Will I outlive that money which I'll be getting, or will I continue getting it till till sort of I am present in the world? The third question is, can I trust it? So if you look at the country as a whole, do you have enough checks and balances and governance to ensure that I, as an individual, will get what is promised to me, and there is no erosion in terms of any kind of lack of integrity? So that's a third dimension. So you talk of adequacy, how much will I get? Sustainability, how long will I get? And can I trust it? That is the integrity of the pension system. And it's a weighted average, which gives obviously more weight to the adequacy, which is 40%. Sustainability is 35%, and integrity is 25%. So that's how the whole index is sort of brought together.
And India ranks about 41 out of the 44 countries surveyed altogether. Why does it fare so poorly compared to others?
Yeah, sure. So Sanjay, as I said, adequacy is 40% weightage. So India's adequacy score is actually very low. And key reasons which sort of look at the measure from for an adequacy standpoint is minimum pension. That's the first one. We don't have a universal social security system. So obviously, that's something that we have to live with. We can't just go back and ape some other developed countries who are grappling with their own social security systems. But that's the first point. The second point is a net replacement rate, that areas where we can improve. Third one, which is also very important, is the minimum access to receiving the benefits. What happens in India is we are allowed lump sum payments. Some X% of our retirement corpus can be taken as lump sum. Y% has to be converted to an annuity, etc. And whenever we are allowed less lump sum, all the subscribers cry foul, right? You yourself have sort of come across these news items where people said, no, I want to decide on what I want to do with my money. How can you force me into annuity? I want to be able to withdraw it much before my retirement age, etc. So essentially, all this sort of erodes the pension adequacy. But essentially, given this backdrop, what we can immediately do is look at increasing participation of people in private pension plans, which is currently at 6%. And you have some countries which are as high as 80%. So you can see where we are. And the challenge for us is over 90%, or I think almost 95% of our workforce is in the unorganized sector. And we have very little in the unorganized sector that we can talk about. So that's actually the reason why we fare so poorly in amongst the 44 countries that have got surveyed.
So in 2021, India's score was 43.3, and in 2022 it has gone up marginally, I think, to 44.4. So what accounts for this small improvement?
This is primarily, Sanjay, because of improvement in the adequacy score. And OECD, from where we pick up certain numbers in terms of looking at the calculation of the minimum pension, that there is a small change in the methodology, which sort of has worked in our favor. And, some other times it worked against us. So let's be sort of feel good that it's actually worked in our favor. And it is primarily because of that we see that there's been an improvement in the score for overall index value. But having said that, while we've been talking about how India is not so good in terms of adequacy, etc., I would just like to highlight on the other two indices, though their weightage is less, that on sustainability we are ranked 34 above countries like China, Belgium, Thailand, Portugal, Argentina, etc., primarily because of the demographics and the fact that the old age low dependency ratio is far less as compared to some of these countries. Integrity, we are ranked 38 and score better than some other countries like France, China, Mexico, etc., primarily because of certain aspects where certain reporting, certain communication, etc., is far better in India. Having said that, there's always scope for improvement, and we can just be a tad better as compared to that right now.
One of the recommendations in your report is that coverage under private pension systems needs to be boosted. What do you mean by private pension systems?
So, Sanjay, to be able to answer that, let me give you a bit of a context from where we're talking about private pension, and I will refer back to the 5-pillar pension framework of the World Bank. And that pillar framework talks about pillar 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What is pillar 0? Pillar 0 is a non-contributory pillar to deal explicitly with the poverty alleviation programs that countries may have. So if you look at India, you have the National Social Assistance Program that is funded through the Ministry of Rural Development, and that would form a pillar 0 for us in India. Pillar 1 is a mandated public pension plan with contributions linked to earnings, with the purpose of replacing some pre-retirement income. And this is what we talk about when we say India doesn't have a social security system, unlike, let's say, countries like the USA or UK, etc. So India doesn't have a pillar 1. Pillar 2 typically consists of mandated defined contribution plans with individual accounts in occupational personal pension plans. And examples over here would be the Employees Provident Fund and NPS for government employees post 2004. So pillar 2 is what we have. Pillar 3 is the voluntary and fully funded occupational or personal pension plans like corporate NPS, insurance products that I buy, which is because it's purely voluntary. So that is pillar 3. Pillar 4, of course, is pillar relating to additional support through family, healthcare, housing, etc. So in India, when we talk of when we're talking about private pension arrangements, typically under this 5-pillar framework consists of pillar 1 and 2. We don't have pillar 1 in India, so we're talking about pillar 2, which means that we need to be able to boost more programs which are mandated defined contribution schemes with individual accounts, like the current Provident Fund and the NPS for government employees, to be able to boost the larger coverage across the workforce.
Now, what are some of the steps that can be taken to boost private pension coverage?
So from a policymaker or employer standpoint, I think, Sanjay, it's very critical for us to understand that actually the traditional employee-employer arrangements are really getting blurred. And if we're talking about different kinds of arrangements, I mean, we talked about work from home, then we're talking about gig platform. Recently, there are some organizations who even sort of said moonlighting is also fine, So you obviously have different kinds of working relationships across the board in the country, which means that these are non-standard employment contracts, and they need to have more flexibility. What is the kind of flexibility that we're talking about? When you talk of participation in these plans, we need to avoid conditions like, work hours, something relating to work hours. If somebody is working for X hours is when the person participates. What is the length of the employment? Is it minimum 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc.? Or an earnings threshold? Are we saying that anybody above an X amount can only participate to this extent? So these are some of the things that the policymakers can actually do to ensure that there is a greater participation. And of course, last but not the least, greater communication. See, because what is happening is, whenever you go talk to people and say, you will be part of this mandated plan, and, we will be contributing X amount, you will be contributing equal amount or Y amount, whatever be the case, people come back and say that, no, my take home is going to reduce, etc. So those are the challenges that we have to grapple with. That is where greater communication and the importance of long-term planning is very, very critical for us to be able to nudge people to start thinking of retirement and saving for retirement in a better manner.
Now, the gig economy is quite vast in India. How
Yes,
can
yes.
more gig workers be brought under pension coverage? What can be done there?
So if you just look at the unorganized sector, and for me, unorganized is the labor, the labor, the gig, the platform, everybody together will be not the traditional employer-employee arrangement is what I can call. Currently, what's happening in India, the unorganized sector has a program called Atal Pension Yojana, which is a government-backed voluntary scheme, which sort of gives a minimum assured pension in proportion to individual contributions. But having said that, one needs more flexibility in participation and contribution for the gig workers. And if you look at a recent report by Niti Aayog, there's a very nice suggestion that they have given that these plans and policies can be uniquely designed by a firm in partnership with the insurance company. So that's something that any of these platform companies, etc., should be able to design, or it could be designed and offered in collaboration with the government, as has been envisaged under the Code on Social Security 2020 that got notified, and we are awaiting the implementation of the same.
Now, how will the implementation of the new labor code help in bringing more people under pension coverage?
So Sanjay, if you look at the detail in the which is entailed in the Social Security Code, there are two aspects I would like to point out. One is the draft Social Security Code talks about improved coverage across a wider working population and hence includes gig and platform workers. And the second thing it talks about is the security of the benefit. So what it is doing essentially is it talks about a suitable social security scheme for gig and platform, of course, but it also talks about streamlining some of the benefits both for the organized and unorganized sector, especially under EPFO, ESIC, etc. But the third more important thing is there is a provision to set up social security boards at center and the state that would really improve security in for any of these programs for the gig and platform workers, and in general, not just that, but in across a wider working population.
Now, one suggestion in your report is that benefit plans that discourage leakage would help to increase adequacy. Could you elaborate on this point?
Sure. So the report says, and I talked about it earlier in the conversation, comparing to, let's say, China, where they have a minimum age at which you can actually access the retirement kitty. What happens is that if I restrict access to the retirement kitty before retirement, it will ensure minimal erosion of the retirement fund. Otherwise, if I'm allowed to take, let's say, 40% as lump sum, 60% as to convert into an annuity, the 40% lump sum is something that I will use to perhaps pay off, some expenses or some loans that I would have taken. So on retirement, I'll sort of come clean on all my loans. So what is left is only 60%. So that 60% will obviously mean that is my corpus, right? So if I have a lesser amount to be able to buy a retirement regular income, I will obviously get a less income. So what it means is that, you should have some restrictions on what can be withdrawn, when it can be withdrawn, etc. I know all of us love flexibility. We keep saying that it is my money, government cannot put restrictions on how it can be withdrawn, etc. But the purpose of a retirement fund is to be able to help you save and convert that money into retirement. So if I dip into it, obviously it reduces its ability to be able to get me a decent pension. And then if we get flexibility, we obviously have more responsibility. And to top it all, as I said earlier, if frequent job changes implies that we lose gratuity because of the fact that it's not vested, or we use it up as a lump sum when we get. So if at 40, if I get a gratuity, I'm not sure I'll have the discipline to say, okay, let me park it separately, not touch it, so that I use it for my retirement. We don't do that. And all this further reduces the ability of the corpus to get a steady and adequate income at retirement.
And another suggestion in your report is that now pension plans are increasingly shifting from defined benefit to defined contribution. And this poses the risk that people may mismanage their pension corpus. Could you elaborate on this point, and would you have any suggestions for people?
So, Sanjay, you've really touched upon a very important angle. Honestly, while we talk of policymakers doing something for the gig and platform workers, for most of us, we know, given the current context, adequacy and sustainability of retirement income is pretty much in our hands. So, for me, if I want to sort of talk about this, I'll just split it into two parts. First, look at the end goal as a retiree. What would I want? And then use that as a starting point, work backwards and see what needs to be done. The first one is I would require a regular and reliable income, which perhaps is linked to inflation if it's possible. Income that does not run out. That means it's not that I outlive the income, right? So I'm talking about adequacy first. And second is, when you talk about income not running out, you're talking about sustainability. And some flexibility for a rainy day, for those unexpected costs which are bound to happen, because even at 60 you're talking about another 20 years. I may want to leave something behind for my children or grandchildren. That's also a possibility. And another important thing, Sanjay, is at the age of 70, 75, I don't want to be sitting and figuring out large cap, small cap, mid cap, where do I invest, PMS, etc. I mean, all those complications which perhaps I have more appetite for when I'm younger. At the age of 70, 75, one is, even if I'm willing, I do not even know the state of mind one would be in, right? To be able to think of all these things. So decision making should be minimal at that stage in life. That's another requirement. The last but most important is transparency of cost in the pension products. So if you look at the first two or three that I talked about, that is the adequacy of my income, sustainability of the income, that is a regular and reliable income linked to inflation, income that does not run out, some flexibility, etc. I need to start saving for that. The last two that I talked about, no decision making, especially later in life, transparency of cost in the pension product, that's something that the macro environment and the policymakers have to make sure that is available for us. So I'll just sort of split it into two. The first one, let's look at what I need to do for saving for the corpus. I am employed for a certain period. How am I able to save to be able to achieve this kind of adequate and sustainable income? How do I determine how much to do to really save? And earlier you asked me the rule of thumb. So I would say, okay, that's a good starting point, but please do a proper financial planning. Rule of thumb is only a starting point and cannot be the guide for us to be able to plan for ourselves, because each one's circumstance is very different. I may have a spouse who's working. I may have one child, two children, three children. I may want to study myself. I may want to take a break in my career. I want to be able to send my children abroad. Whole lot of things. Lot of uncertainty. So every individual is different. You need to do a proper planning. Second thing is, let's not rely on parents, elders, and peers alone. And because that's what in behavioral economics it's called the bandwagon effect, right? And you need to personalize your plan. Do not do something just because your family and friends are doing it, because FOMO, it might sound funny, but FOMO, that is the fear of missing out, works in financial planning too. Somebody else is buying something, I see, oops, if I miss the opportunity, let me also go and buy, without realizing that it may not be contextual or relevant to my individual circumstance. So I think that's something that we should not do. Second one, perhaps I would say the first one, is overcome inertia. All of us know the power of compounding. Everybody talks about it, yet we keep postponing certain decisions because the process is too cumbersome, requires too much effort. I don't have time. I have my daily deadlines. I have my project deliverables, etc. When do I start doing it? this is equally important. We need to necessarily set aside time to be able to start this process at the earliest. I would not say when we start talking, we should start thinking of saving, but once we start earning, we should start thinking of saving. Third important thing is do a financial workout once a year, because things change, circumstances change, macro conditions change. And of course, this is once a year is standard, but when certain life events like marriage, etc., happen, marriage, birth of a child, etc., happen, you need to take a step back and see, okay, how have my circumstances changed? So that's from what I have to do. As as a policy maker, I think the challenge that most people also see is it's not just about the accumulation phase. Okay, I retire. After that, what next? As I said, you don't want to be getting into too much complicated investment, etc. You want life to be simple. De-accumulation phase is equally important, and this is as tricky as planning for retirement. And I think here the policymaker should step in and have better programs, which are more sort of give more flexibility, more options, and not just rely only on insurance companies, since there's not many people who can afford personal advisors at this stage, right? So we need different kind of products. We need different kind of a different suite of products which have transparency in costs, etc., and which are simple to understand, and which just do not have too much of risk of reinvestment, because as I said, 75, at the age of 75, 80, I don't want to be bothered about reinvestment. Maybe I'm not even a mental position to do that, right? So these are the things which are important from an individual standpoint. And so I thought I'll share some of these tips in terms of what one can do to manage the retirement costs.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Retirement is indeed a very serious subject. It is also very complicated, and people indeed need to start thinking about it from a very early age, and seek perhaps a financial planner's help to work out a good plan. Thank you very much. I'm sure our viewers will gain immensely from this interaction. It has been a pleasure speaking to you.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Goodbye,
have a good day. Thanks. Bye-bye.